Welcome back, Trailblazers. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to take a moment to talk about a tool that has completely transformed the way I plan and navigate my hikes, AllTrails Plus. As a Trailheads ambassador and the organizer of the Yakima Valley Trekkers, I'm out on the trails a lot. One of my favorite features of AllTrails Plus is the ability to edit and create my own maps. Conditions change, fallen trees, washed out sections, or even a last-minute reroute. And with AllTrails Plus, I can adjust my route on the fly and share it with others so everyone stays informed and safe. AllTrails Plus also gives you offline maps, wrong turn alerts, and 3D trail previews to help you stay on track and make the most of your adventure. And the best part, you can get 30% off an AllTrails Plus membership with my exclusive link in the episode show notes. So whether you're planning your next big trek or just looking for a new trail to explore, AllTrails Plus has you covered. Check it out and let's hit the trail. Welcome to Season 15 of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm your host, Ivan, and each week we're hitting the trail through conversations with extraordinary hikers from across the United States and beyond. Summer is the season the high country has been holding its breath for. The pass is finally clear, the snowfields shrink back to the shadows, and suddenly the whole map opens up. Ridgelines we could only dream about in February are right there waiting. There's a particular kind of ambition that lives in these long days. The 4 a.m. alpine start, the meadows exploding with lupin and paintbrush, the cold shock of a glacier-fed lake at the end of a dusty climb. The light stretches on forever, and so does the sense that anything is possible up there. This season, I've had the privilege of sitting down with hikers who chase those big summer objectives, the long miles, the high summits, the trips that test what you're made of, and reward you with the kind of views you carry on for the rest of your life. Their stories are about going farther, reaching higher, and finding out who you become somewhere above the tree line. So fill the water bottles, check the forecast one more time, and get ready. Season 15 is here, and the conversations ahead are as wide open, sun-drenched, and full of possibility as a long summer day in the high country. 3 years since his first episode, Justin, aka JustRoc, is back on Hikes and Mikes, host of the JustRoc podcast, founder of the JustRoc crew, and the guy whose Star Wars-themed group hike helped inspire Yakima Valley trekkers. He returns to catch us up on the biggest chapters of the last 3 years. Justin revisits Sandstone Peak, the accidental sunset hike that pulled him off the dance floor and onto the trail, and how one mountain keeps generating the friendships and the moments that built his community. We get into Guatemala, the 4-year dream of Acatenango, and the Fuego Ridge that finally clicked after a random trail conversation, including the overnight climb, the 13,000-foot summit push, and the moment the overcast skies opened up right as the guide said it was time to turn back. He also shares the story behind recording his most stunning video episode yet with crewmate Francis Ngo live at Mount Rainier National Park during golden hour. Then there's the Fool's Traverse, the 11-peak, 26-mile, 18-hour endurance challenge in the Mount Baldy area that Justin calls his Toxic X. 3 attempts, 3 unfinished routes, and one philosophy that keeps winning out: people over peaks. Out of that weekend came an impromptu campground group pod at Manker Flats, proof of what Stay Ready, Rock Steady actually looks like in practice. We close out on the launch of his Trails and Tribulations survival story series, the growing pains of moving from audio-only to in-person video episodes, and his full Naturalist era, corvid identification, sparkbirds, Knox binoculars, and co-hosting birding events with the Bird Homies and LA Trail Killers. A sequel episode packed with epic treks, hard-earned lessons, and a whole lot of community. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guest, Justin. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I have a really special guest with me today, almost 3 years to the date that he last came on the podcast. You know him as a community organizer, a fellow podcaster. You know his nickname, JustRoc, from the JustRoc podcast, the JustRoc Crew Hiking Club. I got a chance to visit with him, and he was a huge inspiration for Yakima Valley trekkers. My experience with him and Jonathan on their episode 2 Star Wars hike was a huge inspiration for me. He's a great community organizer. You guys know the amazing work that he does. But his name is Justin. You can check out his podcast, the JustRoc podcast. Justin, thank you for coming back. I can't believe it's already been 3 years since your last episode. But for folks that haven't had a chance to listen to the first episode, can you kick things off by introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about yourself, your podcast, and your hiking experience?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, I'm Justin, also known as JustRoc from the JustRoc crew, host of the JustRoc podcast. Before I get into all that, I just want to give you your flowers. Congrats on 4 years of the Hikes and Mikes podcast, another milestone in the books. I feel compelled to say that because we're both indie podcasters, so I just want to shoot you your flowers real quick.
I appreciate it, Justin. You've been a huge inspiration as well as a mentor, especially once we kicked off a few of the video episodes.
Yeah, right on. Always happy to help. You know, we're both all in this together. I feel like we're both growing, both learning with these different platforms and, you know, just do better at our craft. But to get back to your original question, yeah, I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland. For people who are not familiar, I moved to LA over 20 years ago. So now I've lived in Los Angeles longer than I lived in Maryland. So I really consider myself an Angelino now. My hiking journey began about, I want to say 8 years ago, April 2017. You know, I've been living in LA for a while, went to college out here, and really didn't discover the mountains or the trails until 8 years ago. I was going through a rough patch in my life, a deep depression, and the one thing that I never did in Los Angeles or Southern California was explore those local trails and mountains, you know, go further out into the woods or the wilderness. Of course, I went to the beach, but that's very accessible, especially in Los Angeles. And a lot of those first inaugural hikes began in Malibu in the Santa Monica Mountains. After a few years of just doing a bunch of hikes in the Santa Monica Mountains, San Gabriel's, I started my own hiking group called the JustRoc crew in 2019. And then all of this momentum eventually led to starting the JustRoc podcast at the height of the global pandemic in March 2020 during my birthday month. And the rest is history. That's kind of like my background, the Cliff Notes version. But before I was a trekker, I was a hardcore b-boy and breakdancer. So I always tell people I went from breaking to trekking, or I went from the dance floors to the great outdoors.
And I know we touched base on this on your first episode, but Sandstone Peak continues to play a pivotal role in your outdoor journey, and not just your outdoor journey, but your community journey as well. You know, for folks that didn't listen to the first episode, it was an accidental sunset hike on Sandstone Peak that pulled you kind of off the dance floor and onto the trail. But it's also, I didn't realize it's also where you met Denise, RJ. You connected with Jonathan, aka Juan Flowers, for your 5-year 100th episode where he interviewed you. What do you think about Sandstone Peak that keeps generating, you know, these memorable moments in your story?
Oof. Sandstone Peak is the trail, is the mountain where I just had an epiphany in my life, and it just put me down a new lifestyle. I remember that accidental sunset was back in April 2017, and that landscape, that trail, the views, it just has this very renewing spirit. It feels very spiritual up there. It's also the tallest peak in the Santa Monica Mountains at 3,014 feet, and then you can see the Pacific Ocean in the distance, the Channel Islands, and even Catalina on a clear day. And I think what it is, the landscape out there, and especially since I discovered it during sunset, it just felt like the whole world was glowing. And when I reached the summit that first time up there accidentally for sunset, I was going through a lot in my life and a lot of emotions. And it was when I reached the summit of Sandstone Peak that I began to realize that, wow, I might have discovered something that I was going to learn to love. Like when I first discovered dance, discovered a new love, a new passion. And it was also up there that I was like, oh, I'm a hiker. I'm an explorer. Like I really felt that identity in my mind. I think that was like the third or fourth hike in my hiking journey. And it was also on that day too, where I really felt like I climbed out of the depression that I was in. So I think that place just generates so much for me in terms of like memories and meeting the best people, just because of how sentimental it means to me. And also on top of that, it's just, I know I'm biased, but the landscape up there, it's iconic. You know, you have other peaks surrounding you, the Pacific Ocean, all these these like just really iconic SoCal landscape features. And I met some of the best people, in the community on that trail, on that peak. I hosted my first collab group hike up there as well. And Jonathan Flores, Juan Flowers from Outdoor Adventures Plus, the Bird Homies, Nature's Palette. He has too many things going on. We call ourselves Sandstone Sherpas because we love bringing people up to that trail, up to that peak. That place is just, we have a hashtag for it. We just say Sandstone Forever. It's our favorite trail of all time. We've experienced it for countless sunsets. It's a place where I feel that I can truly reset, especially if I'm going through, a rough patch or I just need to escape the noise of everyday life. I feel like up there, that is my home. I can really reset myself. So that's why I keep going back there, and that's why it'll always remain a very special place. And I'll even go there also in the morning. It doesn't have to be sunset. It's just, everybody has that trail or that peak or that park that they always return to when they need to, or just to enjoy the views, get a good exercise, because it's a place that reminds you of why you do this and why it's so special to be out in nature and the trails.
Wild to think that moment on that accidental sunset hike has led you to building this amazing community over the last couple years. And for me, Justin, it was really a struggle to not make this episode about another special place that you visited, and that's Guatemala, because the footage and media that you've been able to share from your visit was just mind-blowing. And I know that you have an episode specifically speaking on your experience, but I still wanted to ask you because, listening to your story and hearing about that, you've been sitting kind of on this stream to visit Guatemala since 2021. It came through Victor Martinez's story on, I think, episode 37. And then it took 4 years. And then a random comment from Evie, I think, on Semi Peak, where it really made you pull the trigger. Could you share the journey of reaching Guatemala and what made that moment finally click where you did decide to pull the trigger after 4 years?
Oh man, Guatemala, the great Guatemala. The mountain Acatenango, the Fuego Ridge. Thank you for bringing me back to that. I forgot that this happened this year at the beginning of March. Truly a once-in-a-lifetime trek, a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Yeah, so I first learned about it because of a past guest, as you mentioned, Victor Martinez from LA Trail Killers, and his storytelling of this expedition, this erupting volcano, just had me so captivated and in awe. And I was just like, I got to do it. But I just never did. You just let time pass. I haven't really done too much international traveling besides to the motherland, like the Philippines. And so it's always in the back of my head, yeah, Justin, get out to Central America, do Guatemala, travel to hike. Something that I never really did before. And it's funny, so much time passed. And then I remember when Victor told me about that in 2021, I think about 3 or 4 years later, a past guest of both of us, Luis from Vamos Hiking Crew, also was talking about it when I interviewed him. And he's also from Guatemala. So that re-sparked the interest of, okay, I really need to make this happen. And then relatively around that same time, one of our hiking crewmates, Evie, or we call her Evie everywhere because of her love for traveling and just being everywhere. I think it was at the end of last year, end of 2025 in December. Just a small group of us. We went to Semi Peak. It's like this mini micro mountain range relatively near the backside of the Santa Monica Mountains, and doesn't get as much acclaim, but it has some tall peaks and incredible vista points for sunset. And as we were just hiking, to the peak for sunset, we were just, chit-chatting, the typical trail chatter, what you got going on, where you going to be? And she was talking about her future travels of Central America and how she wanted to really do this volcano hike in Guatemala. And I was like, wait a second, are you talking about the erupting volcano? And she was like, yes, that's the main reason I'm going out there. I'm going to go to El Salvador, Belize, which is next door. But the main reason I'm going out there is because of this great Guatemala volcano hike. And I was like, wow, okay, if that's not a sign to pull the trigger, I don't know what else is, and this is somebody that's been hiking with us a lot the past 2 years. And then the other girl in the group, Tori, she was like, I really want to do that too. And then the other person in the group was like, I've been wanting to do that too. So I was like, okay, these are all the signs. Oftentimes in life, you need to pay attention to the omens and the signs and follow them. And if you don't, you're going to miss the boat again. It's important to, pay attention to these things. So it was like then and there that we were like, okay, if you're already going to be out there, let's figure out like the best months when to make it happen. And I think we were talking about March of 2026. And I was like, that's even more perfect because that's my birthday month. This would be a birthday gift to myself too. So I was like, okay, all the stars are aligning. You just got to pull the trigger. The hardest thing is just booking that flight, right? You just got to get that first step out of the way. But that was the reason finally that I pulled the trigger 4 or 5 years later. It was a random trail conversation with people in the hiking group and just everyone being on the same page of been wanting to do it. So I was like, well, if we're going to do it, an international trek expedition, I would love to do it with these people. So that's how it happened.
Man, that's beautiful, man. How it all kind of came together, all relatively within the same scope from, talking to Mr. Traveler to then being on the trail and then everybody just being like, I want to go there. I want to go there. And then boom, you're there. Justin, I think another great skill that you have is you have some really great gems when it comes to your wordsmith. And from this hike, I think you told your crew that a brutal hike strips everyone down. No egos, no job titles, no social media personas. With that kind of in reference, what did Guatemala show you about yourself or maybe the crew that maybe a LA day hike or LA adventure never would?
Really, really great question. I mean, don't get me wrong, LA and SoCal got a lot of challenging, epic hikes. We really do have a pretty profound peak bagging culture out here in SoCal. But man, that Guatemala hike, I'm not going to lie, Ivan, I don't know how that's like a super touristy thing. That hike is hard. It is challenging. It is like 8 to 9 miles. It is like over 6,000 feet of elevation gain. It's an overnight hike. So you have to hike to base camp and then you spend the night and then do a sunrise hike the next day to the top of the volcano that you are currently sleeping at. It just really showed me and the crew that we are strong and resilient. Like we all flew in basically on a Friday or a Thursday and did the hike on a Saturday. And this is a high elevation hike too. The top is like around 13,000 feet. And this Guatemala volcano hike, what it showed us that a LA day hike or our mountains won't is it just showed us the literal power or the literal raw power of Earth and just how like immensely humbling it is to see a violent and frequently erupting volcano every like 10 minutes in your face because we hiked all the way to the Fuego Ridge, which you actually have to pay more to get that up close and personal experience of seeing this erupting volcano. I don't know if you can do that anywhere in the United States as it typically those volcanoes are in a national park system or it's like super strict, inside the national parks out of safety and precaution. But, this is Central America. I feel like, it's a bit more wild out there, They're a little looser on the on the restrictions and what you can experience. So those are some of the things that it just showed us that here in LA or SoCal that we normally wouldn't get. A lot of these international trek expeditions just bring you to landscapes that are just so mind-blowing, like to see and hear and feel under the ground an erupting volcano with ash and the colors. It was just the most dramatic experience because we didn't even know if we were going to see the erupting volcano because the day that we were hiking up, the weather system was so on and off. There was overcast and then it was sunny and then it was overcast and there's winds and there would be some openings here and there, but it was just so like erratic. It was like out of a movie how we experienced the erupting volcano because after we got to base camp, which is called Acatenango, you have to go down the mountain and then across to Volcán de Fuego on the Fuego Ridge. And when we got to the top of the Fuego Ridge, it was complete overcast. Like we couldn't see the mountain even erupting. I was like, this is about to be the most depressing experience. You pay this money, you fly out to Guatemala, it's not insanely far from LA. It's like 5 hours. But like, this is the reason you came out here. And we stayed up there for like 25 minutes and still no view, like we could see one side of the mountain or we could see one side of the sky, but it wasn't where the mountain was. Even the guides, because when you do this, you have to typically book it through like an agency. We went through Ox Expeditions and the guy was telling us, hey, we're going to probably have to leave soon if it doesn't start to clear up and go back to camp. And literally when he said that, the skies opened up and then the volcano started erupting and everyone was just shook. We were like, Oh my God. And this was also the moment when the guides of Ox expeditions were like, okay, we can get even closer to where the erupting volcano is, because they don't want to bring us too close if we couldn't get that view, right? And also there were some other tour groups getting in front of us. So a lot of us were getting really frustrated. Like, why are they able to go ahead of us? Why are you not bringing us up there to at least be in the front? But the special thing was we got in front of all the other groups. They had like this one spot on the ridge. This is a very narrow ridge, mind you. Volcanic sand at the top. And we had a front row seat to the erupting volcano in front of, there must have been like at one point, like hundreds of people on this ridge, like a Disneyland line, but we were in the very front and we had the best view. It was erupting every 5 minutes. You see lava trickling down the mountain, and you're just so humbled by an experience like that. Because I don't know, they might close this like in a few years, just because there's been a lot of incidents in the past too of like almost like hitting spectators, or it's erupting too erratically. Yeah, it's just one of those moments that makes you realize like, wow, I'm so insignificant, and to experience such like raw power of this earth just makes you in awe. You're just in shock and awe, and you're like, wow, I get to experience this along with all these other people in your group or all these other foreigners. It truly is those once in a lifetime treks.
Kind of touching on what you said, like this is a physically demanding trek. Like it's no easy way to get to this. You got to put in the work. And I'm wondering if you could share about how you were physically feeling, especially like you mentioned, you were standing at base camp like at 3 a.m. And I feel like at that time, with the overcast and the weather not necessarily cooperating, maybe your stoke meter wasn't as high. How was it physically, at that time, deciding to make that trek up, even though things weren't lining up at first?
So it wasn't 3 a.m. So when we reached base camp, it was around 3 or 4 p.m. It was Acatenango base camp. They gave us like about a 45-minute to an hour break. But at that point, we were already pretty beat up by the trail, because literally from the beginning of the hike, it's a straight up ascent. Like you need your hiking poles. Yeah, you get breaks here and there, but there were so many people like within the group that I was with that were just like, they looked miserable. And a lot of them paid for the porters or the Sherpas to carry their backpacks up. You have that option. It's actually pretty nice if you want to, do that, because you're carrying a lot of equipment, because you're also helping carry up like some of the food. What a lot of these agencies or guides do is they, it's an all-inclusive package. You're going to have wine up there. You're going to have food for like the night, breakfast, lunch, dinner. So they try to spread it around all the hikers. So you're also carrying like extra weight on you on this like overnight hike. And that just adds to the overall difficulty, because it's already super steep. Like I've done so many challenging hard hikes, in my quote unquote hiking career. And this one was a challenge, not the hardest that I've done, but it's a leg buster. It's an ass kicker. It's definitely not for the faint of heart. Like I saw some people struggling with elevation, struggling with how steep it was, people falling to the back, almost making the decision to turn around. But, there's so many porters and guides there to help support you or to monitor the situation if you really do need to turn around, or if they can give you some like altitude medicine. I had done a few training hikes beforehand, but at that moment when we reached the Acatenango base camp, that 45-minute to an hour break really helped, because the next portion, since we did pay extra to go to the Fuego Ridge, where you could see the erupting volcano even closer, you can see it from base camp. It looks spectacular, but if you want to go for like the spiciness and the extra, core memory, you definitely can book the Fuego Ridge. And that is a whole other journey of itself, because you have to descend down one mountain and then climb up the next mountain, which is Volcán de Fuego, to get to the Fuego Ridge. And remember, when you go down one mountain, you got to come up that damn mountain. So this was an all-day thing. I think we started the hike at like 8 a.m., 9 a.m., got to base camp at like 4 p.m. And then they told us, we're not going to get back to base camp after the Fuego Ridge until like after 10. After 11. So I was like, oh God, this is going to be one of those long days. You just got to slog it out and embrace the grind. But definitely doing training hikes in LA, the high altitude ones like around the Mount Baldy area, definitely helped prepare us. Yeah, the group that I was with, shout outs to Matt, Kerr, Mai, Tori, Ruby, Evie, they're all pretty strong hikers. They can thug it out even if they haven't been training, but I think most of them had been training. You got to just dig into that mental, the mental fortitude, and just one foot in front of the other. Don't worry about your pace. Just focus on your breath and your steps, and you'll get there eventually.
Now, I feel like I could talk to you about your experience, for the remainder of the episode, but I did want to switch gears because, we were able to meet up last year here in the Pacific Northwest just by chance. I think same thing happened. I saw maybe a story that you were in town visiting family, and I just so happened to have a concert to go in Seattle. Yeah, we were able to link up at the Space Needle, and it just so happened to be, I think, the Bite of Seattle. But you were there not just visiting family, but you also recorded one of your video episodes with, I might be biased, but one of the best backdrops that you could get. And that's at Mount Rainier National Park with Rainier just right in your background. And you did an amazing episode with Francis. Can you share a little bit about that experience and going to that specific location and shooting on site instead of booking remotely with Francis? Because I think, you had done a few video episodes, but this one was, your first one where you're out of state, shooting remotely. There's certain sections of the park where you get Wi-Fi, or not Wi-Fi, but cell service, but it is a remote region. Can you share a little bit about that experience filming remotely there at Mount Rainier National Park?
Hands down, the most insane, most stunning backdrop of any video podcast recording I've ever done. The JustRoc podcast, I can tell you that for sure. Yeah, it's really cool and special how that all came together. Francis Ngo, a past guest on the JustRoc podcast, he was like one of the early ones, I think like episode 13 or 14. He's also a hiking crewmate. He's part of the JustRoc crew. He had moved to Seattle a few years ago, and I saw before I traveled up there that he completed and summited Mount Rainier because he's been on his mountaineering journey as of the past couple of years. And I was like, oh man, this would be such a great opportunity to do a follow-up episode with him, but specifically focus on his recent Mount Rainier summit as a mountaineering route. And when I got out there to Seattle, it was mostly spending time with family. I had a few days where I had more free time. And I even lived in Seattle for like 2 years, but I wasn't even outdoorsy yet or like a hiker. This was like around 2008, 2009. I was a city kid. I love the city stuff, I never went to national parks or explored nature. But Francis always knew I had never been to Mount Rainier. And I told him like, dude, like if there's a way that we can get out there and even record like, your recent accomplishment with Mount Rainier as the backdrop, how epic would that be? Because I didn't know anyone like that close to me that has reached the top. You got to do it as a mountaineering route. And I remember it was a random Wednesday and he had Wednesday off in his schedule. He's like, dude, let's make it happen. That would be really special with Mount Rainier as the backdrop. I think it was like a 4-hour drive, something like that. And I'm not going to lie, that was the most epic, like half day adventure ever. Just the drive itself, entering the park. I think we entered through the Paradise side. And we also rented these, like, they weren't even mobile camp chairs. We ordered like these bigger camp chairs from REI to use as like the podcast studio. And so they were a little heavier. So we had to like carry them on our back. And I was like, I don't know how this is going to go. Let's just hike up like half a mile or a little further and see if we can find a spot that opens up. So we're not like also intruding other people's experiences and just see what happens. And the fact that we arrived in Mount Rainier during golden hour, during sunset, I felt like I got the best version of Mount Rainier on my first, visit. I was so mind blown what mile zero looked like and just being in the parking lot and where the restrooms were. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? This is what I've been looking at from a distance. All the years I've been living in Seattle, all the years I've been visiting Seattle. And I was like, why didn't I ever get out here like much earlier? But I was just so grateful in that moment to finally be there for a very intentional purpose, such as recording a pod with a hiking crewmate that just summited the damn mountain, right? And I remember we hiked up maybe half a mile and we found this spot that was off the main trail, just set up. And I had like my mobile podcasting setup, the wireless lavalier mics, had my notes in hand, and yeah, got it done. I think it was about a little over an hour, that episode. And I just was freaking out the whole time because I would like literally look behind me and I was like, this is the most stunning 14,000 foot mountain. It's just so dramatic looking. It's so prominent looking because there aren't other mountain peaks around it. Like it just shoots up to the sky. And when you're in Seattle, like on a clear day or wherever you are in Washington State, it's just this giant, it's like if Mount Whitney was an hour away from LA County, like the tallest mountain in the U.S. Or the continental U.S., Mount Whitney. And although I hadn't done too many video episodes, I felt like that was like a recording where it deserved that extra effort to make it out to the national park, do it with a hiking crewmate, and just see what happens. If anything, worst comes to worst, I got to see Mount Rainier up close and personal. And just the colors out there, the wildflowers, it during sunset. I could see like other mountains, snow-capped mountains in the distance. I saw marmots wrestling for the first time ever. Like I'd never seen that in my life. I think that's like a Mount Rainier thing because I saw some recent content about that. And I saw goats. I saw mountain goats on the sides of the hills. I was like, where am I? I was like, this is why Mount Rainier National Park is just like the most gorgeous landscape ever. Like, I just remember being so happy. Also, the mosquitoes were eating at our legs when we were doing the recording, so that wasn't fun. But, you know, it's recordings like that that I always remember because it's like you made that extra effort. You actually had the mountain that the guest summited in the backdrop. You're always going to remember this, you know, myself and the guest. I can't wait to get back out there. I'll definitely be bugging you and want to hike with you out there. Show me a longer trail, not just me hiking half a mile.
For sure, man. And hopefully you can bring the luck because I've gone up into the park like 3 times this year and she's been hiding. Either the top is covered in clouds or it's just sunken in. But man, that recording that you did with Francis, she was fully out. There's no clouds, golden hour. It was just a beautiful backdrop. And I forgot her name, but one of our newest Seattle Storm WNBA players made a funny comment on one of our local medias. She stepped out to her balcony. She's not from, you know, Seattle or Washington. And she was looking out on her balcony and she was like, what is that thing in the distance? Is that clouds? Is that like, what is that? And it wasn't until she went back to practice where they're like, oh, that's the mountain. The mountain's out. And she's like, that's Mount Rainier? Like, it's that big? And just her reaction, she's like, I finally get it when people say the mountain's out. Especially in Seattle, it's like right in your face. And once you get closer and closer, it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, you're right. You bring up a good point. It's often hiding, but when it peaks out, it's in full glory.
Now, Justin, I did want to talk about one of your most recent accomplishments, and I think this is another gem of the JustRoc quotes. So let's talk about the Fool's Traverse that you've called...
Oh, God.
your toxic ex who you keep coming back to, because I think you just did your 3rd attempt. So can you share with the audience what keeps pulling you back to something that's been so physically and mentally demanding? And your first 2 attempts, I believe, capped out at 8 out of 11. Can you share what happened this year?
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing me back to my trauma again. Yeah, for people not familiar, before I get into your question, the Fool's Traverse is an 11-peak endurance challenge in the Mount Baldy area here in Southern California. It's hosted by our friends Traverse Outdoors. Shout out to RJ Soria, Jeremy Boggs, and all the volunteers that make this event possible. So it's an 11-peak endurance challenge, and if you complete it, it's 26 miles, up to 12,000 feet of elevation gain, depending on which side you start on. And in order to finish it, you have to do it within 18 hours or you get disqualified. And it is just this monstrous traverse route that connects 11 peaks. And my first attempt, it's not an annual event because it's kind of a hard event to put on by the organizers. They always run into a lot of red tape, I think. But my first attempt was back in 2021, and I completed it with a small group, 8 of the 11. From this, you can either start from 2 sides, either the Mount Baldy side or Icehouse Canyon. Yeah, the first year, 2021, that I attempted it, completed 8 of the 11 peaks. And I was like, wow, I didn't know that all these peaks were even out there and that they all connected. And even completing 8 of the 11 was such a massive accomplishment. That was like 24 miles, like 9,000 feet of gain, like just a crazy day. And, you know, that first attempt, it was in October, so we had lost a lot of... We didn't have enough like sunlight and light to really do the whole route safely because sunset was like at 5 p.m. in October. And then 2 years later, I attempted it again in 2023. The same result, a bit of a slightly different group. Well, actually, let me go back to the first time, 2021. One of my crewmates retore his meniscus on the way up to one of the peaks, so which is why I didn't complete all 11. I didn't want to abandon him. I'm going to stay with him on the mountain and walk down with him and make sure he gets back safely. So I had to abandon that vision, that fantasy of completing all 11, even though it would have taken my entire soul and being to complete it. And then 2 years later, 2023, it was my second attempt, slightly different group. Really thought we were going to complete all 11, but then when we got to there's this one peak that we all hate. It's called Telegraph Peak. And we just made another decision up there like, oh my goodness, like We didn't get there at the right time. It's now 5 p.m. again. Sunsets at 5 p.m. We just made a collective decision as a group not to continue further. Everyone was just already beat up and out of it. And then, just as the Toxic X, it is the Fool's Traverse. This event was being held again this year on June 13th, 2026. This is, remember, this is, the last attempt was 3 years ago. So I was like, okay, this is going to be the year. Third time's a charm. I trained harder than any previous attempt. I was in the best shape that I've been in a long time in regards to like peak bagging, lost a decent amount of weight, and just felt really strong going into it. And man, there's a reason that event's called the Fool's Traverse. You just feel like a fool all the time, whether you're training for it on the day of. It's a very particular adjective and word that describes the event so fully. And to get to your main question, what happened on this third attempt? A lot happened. I started from the other side with a different group, another small group. I started from the Mount Baldy side this year. Still just as challenging, but like maybe not as difficult as doing it from the other side in Icehouse Canyon. And I thought that would be my ticket home. This year, I felt like I went backwards. Completed 6 of the 11 peaks, but it was because after we completed 6 peaks, we arrived at the only aid station in the trail. It's at this location called Icehouse Saddle. It's kind of like where you can go in multiple directions to go to like Cucamonga Peak, Ontario Peak, and etc. After we fueled up on water and snacked and, basically reset to start the next journey to complete the next 5, to do all 11 peaks, one of the people in our small group just felt sick. She did not feel good. She had to tap out. She had to like pull over on the side of the ridge and just really evaluate how they felt. They had reached their limit. And this became a whole moment of like deliberation and almost like 20 to 30 minutes, just talking to this person and seeing how they really felt and if they could push further. Because it got emotional. This person really thought like they were going to complete all 11 that day, but there's a reason it's called the Fool's Traverse. You just feel like a damn fool. You fantasize about doing all 11, but people that complete all 11 have been training since January. It's a really godly mountain goat type of feat, and to do it within 18 hours is ridiculous. I just want to complete it. I don't even care about the 18 hours. But ultimately what happened was, some of us in the group were going to keep going, and then we deliberated more, ultimately just decided, or what I like to say, people over peaks, and just decided to go down with this person. Would have been fine to go down by themselves, in my opinion, but just decided to go down together with this person and end the day quicker than we wanted to, but at least we would be able to enjoy the after party where they had a taco bar and drinks and beers, and we could hang out with the community because, I knew if we completed all 11, you're going to miss all of that. And I was just doing all the trek calculations in my mind. I'm like, oh my God, here we go again. I could have done more peaks for sure, but I was also just like over calculating like, okay, I'm probably going to end at like 10 or 11 p.m. This is going to be very lonely of an endeavor, to complete this, because I think I would have had to need to complete it by myself. Wouldn't have been ideal, but that's essentially what happened on the third attempt. And I just had this realization and epiphany that, you know what, Justin, you just got to do this unsanctioned or unofficial, or if they ever do it again, you just got to do it solo. These are definitely one. I noticed the people that were completing this challenge were doing this solo, or like they were just like in their own lane, they might have started out with people, but they were essentially like, they're not waiting for anyone around them. They're trying to stay on schedule with their pace and how long they're staying at each peak, because if you're going to complete all 11 peaks within 18 hours, you can't dilly-dally around. Breaks got to be a minimum. You're only spending a few minutes at each peak. You can't get distracted talking to people you meet on the trail. And that's why I call it the Toxic X, if the event happens again next year, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to put myself through that grind and suffer fest. It's one of the few things that I really want to complete, personally. I used to be a very competitive person before dance and breakdancing. I was a hardcore soccer player, played other sports too. So I always had this competitive edge about me. And then when I got into hiking, or peak bagging, this was one of those like challenges and goals. I was like, man, if I could complete all 11, it's essentially a marathon because it's 26 miles if you complete it. I'm like, this would be some true mountain goat like accolade. I feel like I've done a lot of things I'm super proud of, but this is like the one where I'm like, I feel like it keeps eluding me, or something always happens to someone in the group. And I'm like, yeah, this is one of those things I'd probably just have to do it on my own or with someone that really has that same pace. So yeah, that's what happens on the Fool's Traverse Challenge. What was really cool was got to have an impromptu podcast episode the night before, because I actually camped on the mountain strategically, so I didn't have to drive early in the morning to check in at 2 a.m. So that was like at least a positive, from that experience. Not to say that the bad bagging 6 peaks wasn't positive, that's still an unforgettable memory experience with that group. Shout outs to Alicia, Ruby, Anthony Noodles, Firm Steppin, and people along the way, Elements of Daisy. I might be forgetting some other people, but those kind of experiences, the suffer fest, the grind fest, you never forget those, especially the people that you do it with. Yeah, there's something about that challenge that will always keep calling me back because it really asks you to train properly for it and really reach into the depths of your potential.
I know you're gonna finally, check it off your list here probably in the next couple of years because you're gonna go back to it. But I think this next one's gonna be the one. But like you mentioned, something special did come out of it with an impromptu campsite recording, and this is where it just shows that you embody the "Stay Ready, Rock Steady" motto by always carrying your gear. Can you share how it's been carrying your gear and how it's changed maybe what stories you're able to catch? Because, that was a great moment to capture on the podcast for you.
Yeah, totally out of the blue. I mean, I always like to carry my wireless lavalier mics on trail just in case or in an outdoor setting because you just don't know when a moment might show itself where it's like, yo, maybe we should record this and just see what happens. And exactly what you said. If you stay ready, rock steady, you'll meet that moment and something really cool and memorable will happen. And that's exactly what happened. I drove up that Friday night to Manker Flats campground, which was only like a 5 to 7 minute walk from the check-in table before you start the Fool's Traverse because you actually have to check in. This is an event you actually pay for, like as if you signed up for a trail run race or a race. And I didn't even know that. I mean, I guess I'm not surprised or shocked. When I was at Manker Flats campground, there was a bunch of other Fool's participants out there, including Denise and her husband, Denise Graves, Matt Graves. And they were there when I pulled in, and then I saw another person named Warren Hikes in the community. He's like this summit chef. He had like an open parking spot next to him, an open campsite. He ended up being my camp neighbor. And then I saw more people that were also Fool's participants. And then kind of just naturally, they all congregated to like my campsite or my campground next to Warren Hikes. And I just remember we had like the chairs all around each other, like in campfire like format. And I was like, should we record a podcast right now? Like a group pod, just about our feelings about the Fool's Traverse and just see what happens. And everyone was just like, yeah, sure, why not? And I think what's special about doing it in that moment, impromptu, I didn't have any note cards. I didn't have any questions set up in my head. It allows you to really see how far you've come as like a creator or like a indie podcaster, you know? I feel like you and me both have strong foundations. We've already been doing this for several years. So I felt really nervous about doing it. Like, oh, is this going to be a waste of time? Am I going to ask the right questions? You know, like, how's this really going to turn out? How's the framing going to look? I've never done like really a group pod of 5 people. You know, how is this going to actually unfold? And my goodness, I want to do more group pods. That was actually really fun. It definitely takes off, you know, one-on-one interviews, conversations are incredible. They're very intimate. But a group setting, I just feel like it diffuses a lot of that. You know, maybe there's some anxiety or nervousness, you know, amongst the host or the guest. But when it's a group setting, it feels more at ease. It feels more like fun, especially. And just learning everyone's story, like what inspired them to do the Fool's Traverse, you know, like it was just really cool to like record in that campground setting. You know, there was stellar jays like coming near us, like wanting food. Like these beautiful bluebirds with like a tomahawk. I know we're going to get into some birding further into the pod, but yeah, it was just that moment. I was really proud of myself because I was able to facilitate a conversation, and I was like, wow, that was totally unscripted, unplugged, and it came out way better than I thought it was, because it made it its own episode. It was about the Fool's Traverse, but it was about a very particular moment. It was about the day before it. You know, when you're preparing for it mentally, you are feeling nervous or restlessness, and you've been doing all this training. So to get into the minds of each person around that, you know, this campground group pod for the Fool's Traverse Challenge was, I thought, a very cool thing to document and capture. And the fact that I was ready, rock steady enough to come up with just a few questions that I thought would make sense in this setting. I was happy that it worked out because, you know, as a host, sometimes when you don't got your note cards or you're not prepared mentally, you know, you're not sure if you want to tackle that challenge of doing an impromptu podcast, but it worked out, and it was one of the latest episodes, and got a lot of good feedback on it, and have to do more group pods in the future.
And I did want to touch base on like something that I noticed over the last couple of years, because you have grown the podcast to, I think you were doing remote or audio only episodes at first, and you really have been intentional in shifting into these in-person video episodes. And like you said, in special moments like at Mount Rainier, extra logistics are worth it. How has it been making that transition from audio only to these video podcasts that you've been putting out over the last year?
A growing process, Ivan. Some growing pains for sure, because when you add the video element, as you know, because you've been diving into more video podcasts, and congratulations to you for making that leap as well. There's just extra logistics, rendering, editing, it's just all these layers on top of each other, on top of what you originally do if it was just audio only. The files are bigger. The video component is like, you want to make sure it's clear enough. You got to zoom in sometimes. You want the right framing. I'm not going to lie, it was not easy at first, and it felt like it was too much work. Like, okay, I'm got to meet the guest, record in a local park. Or sometimes I remember there was one guest, and I'm glad I did it, but I definitely was like, this is too much work. I had to hike up a steep trail up to the wisdom tree behind the Hollywood sign and record on this ridge with the mountain dancer, Summit Shuffler. And he's like this incredibly awesome guy, incredible episode. And it was just like, I looked like I was backpacking. It was only like a mile and a half to get to the recording spot, but it was a very steep mile and a half. And I had my camping chairs in the backpacking backpack, and I had the tripod, I had the lavalier mics. I wanted to make it like a proper like mobile podcast recording setup. But it was like also like a little bit closer to sunset. It was hot. I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, I don't even know if I have enough energy to facilitate this conversation. And then prior to the recording, we did a dance off, and he recorded it with his drone. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like already exhausted from the hike, and now I'm exhausted from dancing. And now I'm about to have an hour-long plus conversation with this person. But after I did it and saw the content and how great the conversation came out, I was like, okay, like I see the vision here. It was worth it. Maybe I'm not going to be hiking up steep trails to recording spots, make it easier for myself. Yeah, just a lot of, if you really love your craft, you'll figure out ways to make it less burdensome for you. I ideally record in like local parks now, where I can just bring my wagon up to the footprint or recording spot. Once in a while, I'll do it if the guest wants, maybe a short hike into a spot, not much elevation gain, more like a stroll, right? And I feel like it's really special to record these conversations out in nature. Don't get me wrong, doing it remotely can be just as good, because sometimes that's the only way you can do it. But definitely, as I'm sure you might have gotten from your video podcast recordings, you both feel at much more ease because you're recording out in nature. You can let your guard down even a bit more. You can feel more relaxed. I like to think that the guests are more comfortable. They open up more. And I think what's really cool is the whole like recording out in nature whole process has brought me to different parts of SoCal that I normally wouldn't go to. Sometimes I try to accommodate recording at a local park near the guest, and now I'm like exploring a new part of Southern California, and I was like, wow, this park is gorgeous. Like I would definitely come back here and picnic or do the trails around here. And it's been really cool to go through that journey as well. And now what's even more cool is some of these local parks or trails that I go to just to normally hike myself or with friends or a community event. I'm like pinpointing now like, oh, I recorded an episode there. How cool is that? Or like it was an area that was really special to the guests, like that they bring their family to, and it's like very sentimental to them. So it's been really cool in that aspect to record out in nature. I definitely will still record remotely, but I just told myself, like, well, if I can just like get this process down of recording video podcasts out in nature and really constantly improve, the logistics, the production, where I don't feel like it's like too burdensome or too difficult to do. And also like the editing that goes with it afterwards. Because, it is so different uploading a 15 gigabyte to 25 gigabyte video file than like an audio file. That's like in like seconds or minutes, when you upload that. You have to wait several hours when you upload the video files, and then now you got to find the sections and chop it up and make these podcast clips. It can be a lot until you do it enough where you're like, okay, I understand my work process and flow.
Props to you, Justin. And yeah, like I mentioned, in Seattle last year, I kind of picked your brain on the logistics of doing a video podcast. And I edit the audio episodes, but I had to hire out my video episodes just because.
Smart man.
I was like, this is too much. And you know what's funny? The editor that we've been using for the last couple, his name's Justin. He's based out of LA.
No way. That's hilarious.
Yeah. He's been great to work with. But yeah, for me, the editing process for audio can take anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. And video, I feel like with audio, you can hide some of the, not necessarily mistakes, but things that you can edit out to make the flow better. Where in video, you don't have that because you're going to notice the glitch or the jump. So for me, that was it was hard to kind of let that go. So I was just like, let me send it off to the other Justin and have him work his magic. Because yeah, I couldn't figure it out. But props to you. You've done some amazing video episodes in and around SoCal, and you still allow for audio, and especially in your new series that I do want to touch on, the Trails and Tribulation series. Can you share a little bit about how that kind of came about?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, so within the JustRoc podcast, I have this specialty series, as you mentioned, called Trails and Tribulations, that's dedicated to the outdoor survival stories, the intense trail encounters that like our everyday trekkers or outdoor enthusiasts, eventually have as they go deeper into their outdoor hiking journey. And for myself, this has been an idea that I've been thinking about for the past 2 years. And I'm just always about remixing things up, innovating a little bit, keeping it fresh for myself and the listeners. I also listen to a lot of other podcasts too, your podcast, the Sharp End podcast, Backpacker Out and Alive. Those two podcasts especially specialize in like those kind of stories. And I've heard a lot of episodes, especially from the Sharp End, and I've learned so much from it. And I was like, what if I was able to do it in like my own way, like with my style and really dive into, not, it doesn't have to be people in SoCal, but just like really get into those different stories of like how people navigated really sketchy situations, dangerous situations, and, how they came out of it, because oftentimes, during a long conversation I guess the past several years, I've also just learned to be much more attuned to like outdoor safety and preparedness and hiking safety, especially when you host community group hikes, community group adventures. And then you see all these stories with like search and rescue, and you see all these stories or hear about all these stories where mistakes could have been avoided or like the risk assessment could have been better, but these people didn't know, because maybe they don't know where to look to for resources in terms of like, what may you do in this type of outdoor situation or hiking situation. And also, I just wanted to like do something a bit different with the pod that could make me feel excited about it. I'll always love doing the one-on-one conversations, those long deep dives with the guests, but I also just wanted to do it like, as a creator, I wanted to challenge myself with a new format and see if I could produce something a little bit different that I could also be proud of. And also with this one, it's a bit different. Like it's an open call out, where people can submit their stories and I can look through them and see which ones like I want to feature and whatnot. And I think we have about 7 or 8 episodes out now for the Trails and Tribulation series. And it's been really interesting, launching this series because some of the stories that you get, when you're looking at the submissions, you're like, holy shit, that happened. Like, wow, how, why? And then you just get really into like the details. And then when you actually record it, you're like, wow, a lot of people are going to learn a lot from, this person's experience or story. And what I like about this series is it's just focusing on one story. You and me, we interview and conversate with guests, and it's like a movie, right? We're talking about so many different chapters, their origin story, their adventures. We have rapid fire questions and also other topics that stand out to us of each guest. But I like with this, it just focuses on one story. What were the lessons learned? What happened? So that people can learn from these experiences and feel more confident and prepared in the outdoors, what to be more aware of, what not to do, the type of gear you should have had or not have, or maybe the thought process of, okay, maybe I shouldn't have gone out there without the proper gear, like without a mountaineering helmet, or I should have notified, some contacts of my itinerary just in case something happened. So yeah, that's how the series kind of came about. I need to catch up on that right now, but it's something that's definitely kept doing podcasting fresh for myself. And it's also like different branding too. It's like all black and white. I try to make it a little spooky, a little eerie, give you some anxiety in your life and restlessness. But I mean, at the end of the day, the purpose of the Trails and Tribulations series is so that people can learn to be more safe and confident in the outdoors. It's not meant to scare you. Yeah, I know some of these stories may sound very unnerving because you may see yourself, you may feel this could happen to you, but that's not the point of it. The point of it is, what can you take away from it to apply to your outdoor journey so that you can live that best outdoor adventure lifestyle and minimize the risks that can potentially happen to you? Because every time we go out there, there's always risk. It's about managing it and minimizing that gap. And how do you learn about that? Through podcasts, through blogs, through videos. The more content there's out there about how to stay safe in the outdoors and the things to avoid in certain situations, I think the better.
It's definitely a thought-provoking series, and it really makes you think about your own experiences and how you would address those certain tribulations. It's definitely helped me grow my pack list and things maybe that I didn't think I needed, but, could serve me in a case of an emergency. So really, props to you for launching it and having these thought-provoking guests and experiences on there. Now, Justin, I did want to close out this segment. I feel like this episode, we've talked a lot about trails and tribulations, hard hikes, the Fool's Traverse, the Volcano, and something that's vastly different. But also, I loved the community they came out to these events. And that's the bird watching events that you put on with LA Trail Killers and the Bird Homies Club. What has pulled you into birding? Because it's so different from your other experiences that you've shared on today's episode. What's it been like going bird watching?
So vastly different. I feel like the past 2 years, I've been much more in my naturalist era. At first, I was enamored with, the big peaks and peak bagging and challenging myself, which I will always love and do because that's what keeps me, physically in shape, keeps my mental sharp. But I feel like the longer you get into your nature outdoor journey, you learn that it's just as important to slow down and be observant of the environment that you are walking through, the landscapes you are walking through. You don't want to just feel like you're going through it and trying to make a PR or just trying to get through it. You want to be in coexistence with it. You want to really soak in like what's happening around you, from the flora to the fauna. And I feel like Juan from Outdoor Adventures Plus, the Bird Homies Nature's Palette, has definitely been a big influence in that. I was already naturally doing it a bit on like some of my hikes, the past couple years, just paying attention to the different types of plants that grow on the side of the trail, or the birds in the sky, or like a random like lizard on the ground that looks way bigger than all the other lizards. You just start to look at these things and like stop and be like, you start to ask these questions, right? Because you're naturally curious. You're being like a kid when you're out in nature. And, Juan became a certified California naturalist. And I remember partnering with him. We started co-hosting like plant identification hikes and land acknowledgement, and really getting into that aspect of, these were like naturalist educational trek hikes, right? It's not about peak bagging. It's not about hiking through. It's about going at a very slow pace, stopping and observing. So I think that definitely was a beginning foundation. And also, actually, this is really interesting. I'll bring this up. When you hike, you hear birds and you see birds in the sky, on the trees, in the brushes, in the canyons. And I was starting to like really pay attention to them more. And then there was an Instagram account. This person's actually from Washington State. That Instagram account is called Corvid Research. You might actually be familiar. And this account, this woman specializes in bird observations, but especially for corvids. Corvids, for example, are crows and ravens. And as you know, I'm from Baltimore. Baltimore Ravens, the NFL team, so I already have that kind of affinity there. And one of my favorite birds to observe out in nature is a raven, specifically. Crows are cool too, but specifically ravens. And this account really just got me even more like interested and enamored in observing corvids and especially ravens, because there was this series this person would have called Crow or No. And it was basically they'd pull up a photo of a bird. It was either a raven or a crow. And you would have to make the decision on the spot within seconds of what it was. And then she would explain, oh, it's a raven because of this. Oh, it's a crow because of this. And there was like several photos. I was like, whoa, this is really cool. Like, because I started applying those techniques when I was out on my local trails, like in the Santa Monica Mountains, San Gabriel Mountains. So that started to grow like my, I guess, birding in a sense, because I would specifically start to pay attention to the ravens in the the sky and the crows and how to differentiate them. Ravens are much larger oftentimes than crows. They have hackled feathers underneath of their throat, much more puffy. They usually, when they fly, they're much more graceful. They're not like crows that are very frantic with their wings. Typically, you see ravens in canyons and high elevation areas they like to frequent. And then also just to add on top of that, I've had moments, on trails, like magical moments where I was on like this really large sandstone rock formation and this bird called a rock wren would just literally go right in front of me like 3-4 feet. It's this like brownish gray bird and it would just make the most beautiful song. And I was just so captivated. Like usually when you're around birds, they're so skittish, they fly away from you. But this bird would land right in front of me and just start singing. I recorded this video and it was always stuck in my head. And I was just like, whoa, I didn't even know what bird it was. It was just a beautiful moment. And then I've also had moments where like I'm doing Mount Baldy and I was with a past guest of mine, McKenna Mobley, and she would identify birds like, oh, that's a stellar jay. And it's like this big blue bird. They call them the beggars and the beggars of the high elevation mountains because they just like to get close to you to get food. But it's like this rock star bird because it's blue and it has like a faux hawk, like a mohawk on the top of its head. And it just really stands out. Like I almost feel like that's a spark bird kind of moment. Spark bird meaning like what is the bird that really got you into birding? Like that could be one of them for myself. And then also just, I do a lot of, I think you've noticed on my Instagram stories, like I love doing these sunset bike treks along Marina del Rey and Manhattan Beach during sunset. And then I have this like particular rock spot that I like to sit on. And I just started noticing the shorebirds that would like kind of dance along the waves. Like they would go close to the waves and then the waves would come in and then they like just narrowly avoid getting wet. And I was like, what are they doing? There's like a school of them. There would be like 20 of them just in unison, like a school of fish. And I was very enamored by that observation. Come to find out, the reason that they're so close to the waves is because when the waves recede, that's when like the crabs and the worms and the mollusks like pop out of the ground. So they're trying to get the food there. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. Those were like kind of like the foundational like collective experience of moments that really got me into being more observant of the birds. And then the past couple months, Juan got into birding too from Outdoor Adventures Plus. So we partnered with him and some other groups in the community, LA Trail Killers, to co-host birding events because we have this partnership with Knox. They're these beautiful binoculars. We have a kit. It's like 25 to 30. So when whoever signs up, they get a binocular, not to keep, but to use on the birding event. Because everyone's always, when they hike or they explore, you're always hearing birds. Even when you wake up, like at some point in time, you're going to be like, what bird is that? It's either driving you crazy or you're loving it. And I just feel like it's so important as you get deeper into your hiking or outdoor journey to be able to identify things. That's how you grow a stronger relationship with nature and the land and the wildlife, because you become naturally curious. Like, that's the mockingbird at 3 a.m. that won't shut up, Now you're on the trail and you're like using your binoculars, or you see them in the brush and you're like, wow, like that's that bird and that's here during this time because it migrated. And you just start to see how everything's interconnected, and you just start to see how everything in nature lives in harmony and coexists, and it's been so different. I feel like people are kind of shocked. They see me doing all these epic landscapes and viewpoints and challenging myself. And then they see birding, like bird watching, like what's going on over there, But I think they're starting to see like birding's dope. It's really fascinating to see how big birding has been getting, especially in BIPOC communities the past several years. There's a lot of younger community groups that are really into birding, and it's really cool to see the youth getting into this particular activity. Because, man, I remember after the first birding experience we did in the Malibu Lagoon, I was just hooked. Because you see the natural world in a different way. Now you stop on the trail when you hear the birds and you try to see them or identify them or use the binoculars. And like, you can have the time of your life and you barely hike. You could have walked half a mile, but you saw these different encounters or these different interactions, or you noticed like turkey vultures, red hawks, an osprey, or swallows making a nest in the corner. And now you start noticing, oh, the birds are picking up all this different mud or the straws in the ground because they're making a nest. And now you can see the nest under the freeway. Like those little things, just to be observant of that is like, it's just really cool. And I think just sharpening those tools of like bird watching, plant identification, wildlife identification just brings the trail even more to life for yourself. So you're sharpening those outdoor skill sets and observation skills.
I think just the perfect balance of outdoors and hiking. You do the tough ones, but sometimes it's nice to go on a slower pace and really be intentional and focused on what's around you in your immediate vicinity and how everything's kind of interconnected. Justin, I feel like we only scratched the surface of what you've accomplished over the last 3 years, but this next section of the podcast is our version of like the rapid questions. And these are different from, I believe, the ones that we asked you 3 years ago. So I'm interested in hearing your responses. But the first one is, do you have a pre-hike ritual or a first mile mindset?
Well, my first mile mindset is that the first 30 to 45 minutes of any hike is a grind. It kind of sucks. Your body's getting acclimated to the trail. You're like running on low sleep. So I just tell myself, just get through the first 30 to 45 minutes and you'll be fine the rest of the day. And then what was the other side of that question? It was...
do you have a pre-hike ritual? I
want to answer that too, because I don't know if this is a ritual per se, but I always make sure that I down like 500 milliliters of electrolyte-infused water to be pre-hydrated before the hike so that I'm ahead of my hydration, especially in the summer.
And then my favorite one to ask, what's your go-to post-hike meal or drink, especially there in LA?
What's my go-to post-hike meal or drink? What have I been eating recently? As of lately, I've been going to my spot, Baja California Fish Tacos, and getting a bunch of fish tacos and then shrimp ceviche. That's been my post-hike go-to recently. I love fish tacos. Like, I feel like that's an essential item now after a hike.
Now, what's one piece of gear you'll never compromise on?
Hiking shoes. You can't compromise on that anymore. As you get older, you got to take care of your feet because it's your feet that's getting you through the damn day. And if you don't have enough room in it or if it's not the right grip, you're just going to feel miserable and not want to continue on with the hike, or you're just going to not enjoy the day as much as you should. So definitely, I know hiking shoes, hiking boots, trail runners can be expensive, but, I feel like after a few months, a few years in your journey, invest in something decent.
Now, out of all the gear that you've tested and used over the years, what's the most overrated piece of outdoor gear that you've tried, in your personal opinion?
Most overrated. Oh, I got one for you. It drives me freaking crazy. Pop-up tents. And the reason I say that, I have such a love-hate relationship with pop-up tents, but I say they're so overrated because, you see the video tutorials, the ease of it. It's like instant setup. That's why it's called a pop-up tent, right? So I bought a pretty dope pop-up tent because I saw one of my past podcast guests use it after we did a recording with him. And I was like, oh, wow, like, what a hack. What a camping hack. Like, he literally like opened up this pop-up tent and it was set up within 5 seconds. So I bought the same exact one. It's driving me crazy because I've used it on like 2 or 3 camping trips. And obviously, I open it up. It's easy. It settles in. I can stake it down real quick. It's instant. But folding those things up and breaking it down, I look like a crazy person. It looks like I'm being attacked by the pop-up tent. And I feel like there's people at the campgrounds just looking at me like what is going on with that person? I need to help him. Like I've spent like anywhere from like 20 to 30 minutes like trying to fold the pop-up tent properly because there's a whole process to it. Sometimes I get it. Most of the times I don't, and it takes too long, and I even have like the video with me, and it's kind of hard to break it down by yourself too, because it's like you got to fold it into itself, make a figure 8 into another figure 8 and fold it into itself. So definitely pop-up tents are overrated unless you really take time with it to learn how to break it down. Easy to set up, can be very torturous to pack it back up.
The last question of the rapid fire is, any other hiking or adventure goals for 2026? Or anything exciting on the horizon that we should look out for?
Oh yes, in a few weeks, it will be the JustRoc crew 7-year anniversary. 7 years of hosting community events, group hikes, nature gatherings, which is how I met you 2 or 3 years ago, was through one of our Star Wars inspired group hikes. So very excited about that. Figuring out what to do still. I feel like my summer has been so crazy. But hiking goals, I definitely want to, before the end of the year, hike another California 14,000 foot mountain.
Can't wait to see what you got cooked up for the 7-year anniversary, man. That's going to be special.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to go too crazy, keep it a little bit more chill, a little less work, but just as much fun still. So probably something along the Malibu coastlines, probably a coastal hike, beach day, maybe some seafood. We'll see what happens.
Well, we're getting to the end of the podcast, Justin. We're going to hit you with the this or that questions. A lot has changed since the last time you did them, so I'm interested in hearing what you choose out of these. But the first one is, do you track a hike or do you turn off tracking?
Track a hike.
And then this is going to be a tough one, but home range or destination travel?
Still got to go with home range. Santa Monica Mountains, baby. Forever and always.
And then, are you a trip report writer or a trip report reader?
Oh, trip report reader for sure.
And then if you had to choose between these two, the first mile of the hike or the last mile of the hike?
Oh, geez, that's a hard one. That's a good one. Good job with that one. First mile of the hike.
And this has been one of the hardest ones to answer, but you can only keep one. So if you had to choose between the trail that broke you or the trail that made you, which one would you keep?
The trail that made me.
I'm interested in this one because I'm trying to remember what you were wearing the times I saw you, but trail runners or hiking boots?
Oh, trail runners for sure still.
We talked about the heat at the beginning of the episode, but desert heat or alpine cold?
Oh, alpine cold for sure for me. I grew up in the East Coast in Baltimore, Maryland, in blizzards. I can hang with the cold.
And then one of the tough ones that we might have asked you back 3 years ago, spring wildflowers or fall colors?
Spring wildflowers. Because I've been much more into my naturalist era with plant identification, flower identification.
Now, we talked a lot about type 2 fun, but you also finished things off with type 1 fun. But if you had to choose between the two, which one are you going with?
Type 2 fun still. I like to make my life interesting. Add some spice, make you always do something to make you feel alive.
And then the last one, Justin, backpacking or day hikes?
Great timing with this question. Still day hikes, but more recently, I'm way more curious about backpacking and completing more backpacking routes and overnights and multi-day hikes. I was just recently in Yosemite in the Eastern Sierra. I met so many thru hikers, PCT hikers, GMT hikers. So although I say day hikes at the moment, that scale is quickly going the other way.
You and me both, brother. You and me both. That was it for the this or that questions, Justin. I just want to take the time to thank you for the inspiration, for being a mentor during the podcast, and especially the group hikes. You've definitely been a big supporter in helping me launch my own group here in Yakima. But I just want to take the time to say thank you for everything that you do for the community and for the outdoors. But if folks want to learn more about not just the podcast, but your crew and any other events that you might be coming up, where are some of the places they can follow you on social media or check out more information online?
Yeah, absolutely. We're primarily active on Instagram. The Instagram handle is just.trek, JUST.TREK. Also, my personal is at JustRoc, JUSTROC. We also do have a website, justtrek.net. Justtrek.com was not available. So we do have a website. And if you go on the website, you can sign up for our email newsletter. I probably send out like an email newsletter blast like at least once a month. I usually promote the podcast episodes and the upcoming community events. We do have a Facebook page, but I'm not really active on there as of recently. But if you're curious, it's facebook.com/JustTrekOfficial if you do want to add us on there. But yeah, those are the primary places you can stay updated with us.
Awesome, Justin. We'll be sure to put those on the episode show notes so people can follow along. Thank you once again, brother, for coming on the podcast and sharing your journey and the updates. And I can't wait to see what the rest of 2026 has to offer for you.
Thank you, brother. It's awesome to do this sequel episode with you. And I'm very proud of you as well with Yakima Valley Trekkers. You just celebrated 4 years of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm glad that we're still connected. I'm glad that we're still friends. And can't wait to actually share the trail with you again.
And that brings us to the end of this episode alongside Justin. We extend a heartfelt thanks to him for joining us on the podcast. Be sure to follow him on Instagram at just.trek. And for more, be sure to check out the episode show notes. New episodes will drop every Monday throughout the summer hiking season, with the occasional Friday bonus episodes along the way. To make sure you never miss a moment of these inspiring trail stories, hit that follow or subscribe button. Your support truly keeps this community moving forward, one episode at a time. Don't forget to connect with us on Instagram at Hikes and Mikes. That's where you'll find behind-the-scenes episode visuals, my own summer hiking adventures, and plenty more to keep that high country stoke alive while the long days last. As we wrap up today's journey, remember, the passes are open, the peaks are calling, and the whole season is stretched out ahead of us like a trail with no end in sight. So chase those big summer miles, soak in every hour of daylight, and keep climbing toward whatever's waiting above the next ridge. Until next time, my fellow hikers, happy hiking. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow along with him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, ursaminooroutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, ursaminooroutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order.